Okay, I'll call a meeting to order. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be back. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. First item are minutes of the Council and Committee meeting held Monday, November 26th. The recommendation is to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Somebody.
I didn't say a word.
Okay, we'll try that again. Moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor Hodge. Sorry. The minutes don't reflect who seconded any. Yes. I've been gone.
All right, moving on. Item 2 is a delegation from Ms. Cynthia Aasen, 3D golf performance, about business property tax rates.
I speak into here.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Council members, Honourable Mayor Stewart. Thank you for allowing me the time to present at today's meeting. My name is Cynthia Aasen. My husband and I own a small business in Coquitlam. I represent owners and tenants of 228 Schoolhouse Street. Our objective is to draw attention to our dilemma. We need some tax relief. Our property taxes have gone through the roof. Last year, our property taxes increased 70% in 1 year. Many of us are tenants and did not receive notice until the 1st of June. For us, that meant $10,000 in 1 month. I pay $24,000 a year in property taxes. It represents our third largest expense behind rent and labor. My question to City Councillors and the Honourable Mayor is, how is this reasonable or fair, and how do you expect small businesses to survive, much less thrive, in this community? We would like the City Councillors to put forth a motion to have a 5-year transition period when tax hikes are this significant. It gives us time to plan and budget and actually grow our businesses. Given the unfair tax burden placed on businesses versus residential, we pay 4.5 times that of a residential. The city needs to come up with some solutions that are more equitable. Using commercial real estate values as sole means of determining taxation is archaic, and it's not equitable, and it's not sustainable. We don't need parks and schools. Residents do. There should be a cap on the amount collected. We're paying $11 a square foot. The average is $5 to $6. We're double. We're here today to request the City Council put forth a motion to make changes to the current property tax legislation within your ability to reduce this unfair economic burden, either by capping total paid by a formula on business gross income, regardless of the property value. Lastly, why isn't the city collecting delinquent taxes? My landlord, who does not reside in Coquitlam, has collected my taxes for the last 2 years. He owes the city of Coquitlam in excess of $900,000. I'm a resident. I want those taxes in my pocket. I want them spent on my kids. I pay them, and they're not being collected. So again, why? And the laws are that tenants can't do anything. I'm a commercial tenant, and I have to pay my property taxes, which I've done. And this hasn't gone into the coffers of the city. So again, asking City Council to propose legislation that allows long-term commercial tenants the right to pay property taxes directly, and some legislation that doesn't allow this kind of money just to be left out there for others to take advantage of us. Thank you for your time.
If you could stay there, please. First of all, thank you very much. We've spoken before, and this is a situation that we would love to find a solution to as well. The fact that we can't talk about the businesses and property owners who have or haven't paid their taxes. The reality is, though, that we have almost no authority, no power to collect delinquent taxes. We can charge an interest rate that may well be less than he can get in the market in any case. So you may end up being in a position as a tenant of financing the operation of a landlord's business. And that's a ridiculous situation. As well, I just want to clarify the subtle differences, and it probably doesn't make much difference to you but it's not a tax increase because it's an assessment increase. It became an increase in how much you paid in taxes, but of that 2 3/4% was the responsibility of the city, and the rest was the responsibility of the valuation. And it's also ridiculous that tenants aren't informed of the assessment during the assessment appeal period, and they're not informed of the taxes that they are now owed, because the contract is, we're not privy to the contract that says that you will pay the taxes. So we're sort of stuck here too. I've always said that this is ridiculous situation where the only form of income that cities have is based on the valuation of commercial and residential property. It needs to be fixed. This council has said it repeatedly, and I suspect you'll hear from a couple of council members here on the same subject. And I thank you very much for essentially going public with this, because this is something that there's a great many people in the community are incredibly frustrated about how the taxes due can go up so suddenly. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. It's not ridiculous. It's bizarre, if I can put it that way. You know, there's rather something really wrong. Really, really wrong with this kind of taxation. Number one, if you're going to go to 2 3/4% or 4% taxes, what do you do with the extra? What is it? You paid 70% more in 1 year. What do you do with the other 67%? Goes into some coffer in the city because you're collecting the taxes on it. Am I correct? Am I wrong?
Well, it's on average we only collect 2 3/4% more per year, which means that some businesses actually got a lower tax rate that year. I'll ask Ms. McLeod.
Yes, Your Worship.
Thanks, Ms. McLeod.
This particular portion of the increase does go in the overall pool. When we do the calculation of the tax increase, it's based on the entire taxes that are collected throughout the community. So therefore, there's some gains and some losses, but it's all part of the pool.
Part of the pool, but that pool seems to be pretty lopsided. For instance, okay, last year we were fighting with Mr. Payman at Urban Gate. Okay, he paid 70% higher. And what was the excuse there? The fact is it's in the town center. SkyTrain is coming. SkyTrain ain't coming there, and it's not in the town center. Now you tell me, how in the world can this keep going on? And I remember just a week ago, I asked for samples of businesses, high-rises, low-rises, and everything else, a sample of taxation in our community on everything. So I can make a kind of decision on property taxes. You know, the way it is, the way we're doing it, there never will be sunshine in this kind of thing. We never got it to begin with. Not only that, if you went to zero-based budgeting and did the budgets in March and April and approved it in May, like Victoria requests you to do, you wouldn't have these problems. You wouldn't have these problems because we certainly could do something about it. But we have when there are the taxes before us tonight. You know, way too early to make any decent decisions. And I understand that Port Coquitlam's got some problems with their budget, but it's not only Port Coquitlam, Mayor, it's every municipality that hasn't got a casino in it. We have problems even with the casino in it to kind of lower the taxes or keep them within, you know, and I'll talk on tonight on our budget. I mean, it's not a
Councillor Sikora, we have Councillor Sikora. Yeah. The budget is released tonight.
Yeah, the budget is tonight, I know, but this is ridiculous that these people were driving businesses out of our city. Who employs people in this city is the small businesses employ most of the bloody people. But you know something? Can we get our heads on together to do something about it? No, we can't, because you know what? Tonight we'll be saying how wonderful this budget is until it falls apart next year and somebody else has a 70% increase. Maybe you will do again. Who knows? I mean, it's ridiculous. Thank you very much.
Your Worship, just to respond in terms of how that calculation is done, the taxes throughout BC are done on the assessed value as assigned by BC Assessment Authority. We calculate an average rate across every property within our city and apply that to the assessed value. Every year, some areas of the city go up more than others. So yes, we do have last year Urban Gate and this year this particular area. Each year there are some areas that have gone up more in assessments, but we work on the average. There's also some areas that have less than the average, but we can only apply one rate to all businesses within the city.
So to be clear, we can expect that every year some will go up in value, some will double in value, and some will be reduced by half or whatever. But on average, obviously, the businesses will increase or decrease in value by that average. Is there any way that we can legally change our mill rate depending on the individual business, or do we establish the mill rate based on class?
The mill rate is established by class, and yes, you're absolutely correct. Every year there is going to be some areas that go up more. That can't be helped, and those are the businesses that we have to deal with and work with each year when their particular area goes up. But it will happen every single year for some particular areas.
What happens when property values start going down? Do the budgets start falling? What happens?
No,
Good question.
I'm sorry, that
actually,
doesn't make any sense.
We don't get any more money if property values across the city doubled. We got exactly the same amount as if they went down by, if they all fell by half, because the mill rate would be adjusted so that we collected the amount of money we needed as a city. So this is, the problem here isn't how much money the city collected. If we'd had a 0% tax increase last year, you would have paid a 67% increase in your taxes rather than a 70. That would, we would have been able to save you a little bit. But the vast majority of the challenge that you face this year, or that Urban Gate faced last year, or some other business will face next year, is the result of that wildly fluctuating assessment, perhaps related to, in your case, Portman Bridge or something. That wildly fluctuating assessment is what makes this inherently unfair for you, although I've heard from businesses whose taxes went down last year because, well, some had to go down in order to make it so that yours could go up as much as they did. The assessments have to average out the increase. I've got Councillor Reamer, Asmundson, O'Neill, Hodge, and Sikora again. Reamer.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Aasen, thank you very much for your presentation. It's greatly appreciated. I learned something that I wasn't aware of. I'm wondering if I can ask a general question about unpaid taxes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Or we can have a discussion in general once Ms. Aasen sits down. Either one. It's up to you.
Well, my question is this, is that every year we see ads in the newspaper for properties that have not paid their taxes, fire sale properties, essentially. Do we not do this for commercial as well as for residential?
Yes, we do. It's for all properties that haven't paid their taxes for 3 years. It's in the 3rd year that it goes to tax sale.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
And have we ever sold one? Have we ever been able to sell one and to recover the taxes, or do the taxes simply get paid by the property owner in the 3rd year, typically?
The taxes are almost always paid by the property owner or a mortgage holder before it gets to that point. We've never actually outright sold one for taxes. We've always collected those taxes.
Thank you.
Okay, that helps. Councillor Rasmussen.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. The issue, and we've dealt with this a few times for different businesses, with the assessment value and the increase in assessment values for whether it's a SkyTrain, Portman, improvements to Schoolhouse Street that were done. All those issues play into evaluation, which we don't have control of. The one issue that we could talk about or could do is you could take the class of business that you're in, and we could say that the increase in there could be then averaged out across all the businesses in there. But once again, is that fair to some businesses that have improvements and in areas are getting a better value because of that increased value? Other businesses aren't getting any increase in value, but they're going to pay a higher rate of tax rate. That's one of our options, but I don't think that's the right way to go. You have to treat the whole class as the same.
What are taxes to pay for? Services, fire, police? I mean, it doesn't matter if I'm running a run-down, old, dilapidated building or I'm in a brand-new development. I pay for that already through my rent costs. So taxes should have nothing to do with my improvements on my property. I pay that because I pay higher rent than the guy that's in the building across the street.
We don't deal with leases or rentals. We deal with property ownership, and that's what the taxes are based on. Your landlord is then transferring that assessment or tax owed to you, the leaseholders, within the contracts that you have. I'm just explaining under legislation where we're at and how we have to deal with tax collection. And we have a mill rate that sets the average assessment of a house or a business across, and then sets the rate for the average. So everybody, if our tax rate is 1%, 4%, or whatever, that's what it turns out to be across the average assessment of everybody else. This council has been, for a number of years, shifting property tax burden from businesses to residents. We did 3/4 up until last year's where we did 1% shift over. We've been doing that for a number of years. We had a number of years from about the mid-'80s through the mid-'90s where business taxes were increased. And we're in a situation where we're trying to change that, and we've been changing that. I think we're at about a 16% change over the years, shifting from the tax burden off of businesses onto residents. And it's a long-term issue that this council and council has been committed to doing, but it's not an overnight solution. We understand that the rate's a problem, but the council is and has been working on shifting that tax burden, and we're trying our best at what we have dealing with this. I was at a symposium last week with Metro Vancouver on municipal financing, finding out better ways, and we all agree from all levels of local government that property tax assessment isn't the way to go. Whether you could have a sales tax or an income tax or something that is a better form of taxation, and you won't find any of us here stating that property tax, assessment tax, the way it's set up here in BC, and this is an English system that we brought over here in our country. It's not the best way. But we are at the beholding of the province. We're not a legal form of government under the Constitution, so we can't make those changes. The provincial government sets the rules and regulations on how we are governed and how we operate, and we are stuck within those regulations. But within that, I will say to my council colleagues and being on council that we understand the burden that taxes, that businesses play, and we are trying to shift that burden. So is it enough right away for you? Probably not. But we are trying to do that within a system that we all agree should be a lot more better and equitable. But we don't control the change on that. That's the provincial government that makes that decision for us. Thank you.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. And I may be the only one on council who's actually been to your place of business several times. I've played some 3D rounds of golf there, and it's a wonderful facility, and I'd like to get that on the record, that especially at this time of year, it's a great place to go to stay dry.
Right, and the taco place.
And to work on your golf swing and get expert instruction if you want as well. So congratulations on that great new business. I'd like to echo what Councillor Asmussen especially just said right now, that there's very limited ability for us to change things here. And it reminds me, in ancient days, there was the populace thought that the king could do everything. And King Canute stood on tidal flats and put his arms out and said, well, I'll show you whether I can do everything or not. And he attempted, and he told the tide to stop coming in. And of course, King Canute could not stop the tide from coming in. He wanted to do that as a demonstration that even the almighty king of the land didn't have all sorts of power. Well, I feel like we here, although we would like to have this sort of power to have a better system to treat businesses like yours more fairly, simply don't have that power. We can stand on pedestals all we want, or get up from our thrones and put our hands out and say, stop this terrible system. But if somebody in Victoria isn't listening, and they aren't listening on this situation, nothing is going to happen. The tide of those tax increases is going to keep coming in, and we can't do anything about it. The only time that I've heard in the last several years anything where there's any sort of exception in this was a group of businesses in Richmond were still operating as small businesses, but their property was rezoned residential, and their assessments went through the roof because of that. But they were still operating as businesses. So the provincial government did listen, and did listen in that instance, and did pass a special piece of legislation that gave that group some tax relief. And that was a one-off sort of situation, as far as I know. And your position, just like the Urban Gates position last year, doesn't fit into that. There's no. I can't really see how there could be a specific exception to a situation like yours. The solution is the big long-term solution, getting a better taxation system. And we keep asking the provincial government about it. It's an issue that comes up constantly, and the provincial government of whatever stripe over the last many, many years, it doesn't matter what government it's been, has stuck with the same system. So I think that's really all we can say at this stage. And to add my concern as well, I'm sorry to hear about this plight that you're in, but I can't stand there and stop the tide from coming in. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at a real loss on this one because I completely agree with what my colleagues have said. And I have stood right where you're standing and made this argument before when I was president of the Chamber of Commerce. I completely get it. I've also made this very same pitch at the BC Chamber as well. So I completely understand. There is no relationship between the profitability of your business and what you pay, because your taxes are based on the value of your property and not the income that you're able to generate or not generate from your place of business. And that's one of the fundamental flaws with the way this tax is levied. But as you've heard from my colleagues, this is the only avenue that we as a city have, is through property tax. And in many cases, the same can be said for homeowners, that a homeowner who has a large home is going to pay more tax for services, even though they may not be consuming more services. You know, my school tax is not based on the number of kids I have going to school. So it's the only avenue that we have, and that we have in past made presentation to the provincial government to say that there has to be a better way. As Councillor Asmussen said, the one thing that we have as a council been doing is over the years shifting the burden back to a more even playing field, because you're absolutely right, businesses do pay considerably more. I believe it's 4 times what a residential pay, and yet you're probably paying for your own garbage pickup. You're probably paying for a lot of services that residents have included in their taxes that are not included in yours. And you're right, you know, it can be argued that you're not using pools, although you are contributing to the betterment of the community. And as residents, we are appreciative of what businesses do contribute, both through donations into the community and what they contribute in terms of jobs and employment in our community. But there's no question that businesses do pay more in than they receive in services. And as I said, we are moving in that direction. It's a slow process to gradually try to bring the pendulum back more towards the middle, but in absence of being able to do anything else, our hands are tied. And you know, I appreciate the spot you're in. I am curious on one thing though, and that is, and something that I've learned today, is that as a tenant, you pay the property tax to your landlord, but not to the city.
Right.
Is that correct?
Unless he approves it. So the legislation, unless he approves, I can't go and pay my tax at the city. So I would pay my taxes at the city. I asked when we had the lease, I said I'd prefer to pay direct, like I do with all my residential properties, and no, he wouldn't let us. So he now has collected money from me for 2 years now, to the tune of, I just pulled all the tax certificates, all of which you have a copy. I've paid, I guess, close to $41,000 in property taxes to him, and he has not paid those. And
you receive the tax note. You do not receive the tax notice.
I don't get
so
anything.
You just get this along with yours.
He sends it to me at the beginning of June and says, "No, here's your taxes. Pay them."
And then,
well, I knew that we had taxes of $14,000. That's what we were expecting, and we got one for $24,000.
So he gets the notice, and I think we covered this, that he didn't give you the notice in time. But do you have the ability to go online? Do you have the ability to see what it's going to be, or is he the only one who has the authority to?
I can pull it after the fact. I can't pull it before.
So you can't.
I can't see what the tax are. I can see what the assessed value is, so I can guess.
Right.
And I can take the mill rate and I can guess, which we knew they were going up. So I sent the request to him. Please send me the tax notice. I've seen the assessed values have all jumped through the roof. And, you know, we're dealing with that through BC Assessment. So I do appreciate there's the Government Act and all the stuff that you're talking about. I guess what I'm doing, this is my start point. I'm going to talk to the City of Coquitlam, and I'm not stopping. So it doesn't matter. This, to me, is horrific. It's all across the municipalities. Jock Finlayson wrote an article. Municipalities have increased their spending by 80%. And are we getting more services as residents? I don't know. So my goal is right now is it's got to stop. And yeah, I know what the existing rules and legislation are, and it's wrong, it's inequitable, it's not sustainable.
But in terms of when you get your notice, he sent it to you in June.
Yep.
You pay him. So he tells you this is what you owe me.
Right.
He didn't tell you. But do you have the ability? I know that BC Assessment posts property assessments online. I think January 5th, and you have 6 weeks to go and do it.
It doesn't say how much you owe.
No,
it just says the
but it shows
value.
it shows your increase.
Right.
I mean, you know, if the tax increase for business last year was 3%, if your property had gone up no more than anybody else's, your assessment, your taxes would have only gone up, I think, 3.4%, which was, I think, the average, or no, less than that. It would have been 2.9 or something. But anyway, it would have been under 3% if yours hadn't jumped. But do you have the ability to go and see that ahead of time?
Yes, I do, because I'm a realtor and I can go and pull it.
And
BC Assessments base their assessment on our property on non-arm's length transactions.
Right.
Hank's an owner. He bought because it's a business decision. Are you going to pay this much in lease, or are you going to buy the thing? So again, that's a non-arm's length. So we're going to have that debate with BC Assessment. We've hired a company to go through this assessment with us, but you know, there's nothing we can do about that. Again, this is a start point for me. I'm going public. It's going to be very viral. I'm going to make sure that, you know, if there's other business owners out there, they're going to be part of this program. It's ridiculous. It's out of control, and it's shocking to me, actually.
Right. Okay. So, no, I appreciate, and I completely understand where you're coming from, and I'm just sort of trying to, in my mind, figure out how some of this happened, because I gather you can appeal even though your landlord is the owner.
I found that out very inadvertently when I talked to the company, because I acted for one of the other owners and said they want to go. They have some issues with language. They said, can you represent us? So they signed a general form of proxy, or a general power of attorney for me to act for them, and I engaged this company. And through the conversation with the company, I said, well, I don't know how it's going to work for us because our landlord hasn't authorized this. And the guy said, you can appeal. If you're paying the property taxes, you appeal. So now all the other tenants are going to come in on the appeal. So again, I don't know what the outcome will be. That's January.
This is helpful, because I didn't realize. So you can, even though he's the owner and he actually does the paying of the tax, you as a tenant can appeal the tax, providing you know in time what's going on. But you can yourself do the appeal.
Yes,
according for him, it's easy. He could just pass it on. So for the actual tenants, they do have a mechanism to appeal.
Well, the position that some of the owners, when they're getting their triple net leases, which means they don't have any exposure to expense, is that assessments support value for them. And so there's no incentive for a landlord to go, oh, I really want to reduce the value of my property. What incentive would that be?
That's interesting.
It's a disincentive. So I get why they don't do it.
That's interesting.
So finding out that now we can appeal, that's another part of this that's going to be very much out there, because I don't know if every tenant knows that.
You're absolutely right. If it's in his best interest if the value go up,
right,
and especially when you're paying it. So, okay. Thank you. I've learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I'm just trying to make sure I understand exactly what you're concerned about. And this last conversation with Councillor Hodge, I wasn't quite clear. So, is it the frustration with the 70% increase in the 1 year, the big concern in terms of how the assessed values go up and how that impacts your taxes, or is it the 3% increase in budget from last year?
Both. It's 70% in 1 year that it's expected to be absorbed by a small business without any, you know, how do you plan as a small business?
No, I completely understand that, and I think that, but I think they're two very different issues. So what I understand is that you can't make a proper plan as a business if you're going to get these surprise impacts of your taxes. You can't plan, you don't know how to prepare for it. And that, I think, is a whole issue around the assessment piece that I think I've heard my colleagues certainly speak to, that's a decision made in Victoria in terms of how taxes are calculated. And so I think that's one that we could, and I would certainly entertain helping to share that concern with Victoria, absolutely, that especially given how things are changing so quickly in Coquitlam and perhaps in other municipalities. I think that's a very particular issue. The fact that there are increased costs at the municipal level with some downloading where the federal and the provincial governments aren't living up to their responsibilities and walking away from others, and municipalities are left having to hold the bag, mostly because we can't run a deficit, so we have to have a balanced budget every single year. That's a different kind of conversation. So I just want to make sure that I have understanding about which is the piece that you're most concerned about, and perhaps we can focus the conversation that way.
Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. You know, you're here about 3/4 of an hour, and all you get is lip service. That's all you'll get here. You won't get anything else. I can guarantee you. I mean, Councillor Adamson mentioned in the 80s and the 90s, you know, there was the business taxes were growing and blah, blah, blah. Okay, who was the mayor then? It was me, and I lowered them. I took so much from the
mayors when they got
gave the businesses a break
They
and
went up quite a
upped the
bit.
residential. And those days, because we got the assessments
That's not true.
before we set the budget for every different categories, the council of the day could make a proper decision in April, March and April for a budget. We do them in December. So, you know, it's so silly. We will forever have this kind of problem. So now we're given a break of another 1% or whatever it is. Does it show up on yours? No, it doesn't. It makes it worse. And that's the way it's going to be. It's going to continue to be that. We can blame the government in Victoria. We can blame, you know, Ottawa. We can blame many, many other people why something happens. This council just doesn't get it. And I'm sorry to say that. To my colleagues, you just don't get it. Let me maybe spend a day with you and explain to you how a mill rate works.
We know how it works.
Did you get a mill rate? You set a mill rate this year? No, you didn't.
We know
but
how it works.
tonight
We
you'll
can't
hear
set it until the
that-
assessments come in, Councillor.
That's right. You'll say through the assessments we set the mill rate. That's a wrong wording. I'm sorry. It's wrong wording.
It's the law.
The mill rate is set different, see? And if we would get this, like I asked for different categories just a week ago, if we could get them, I guarantee you that you'd see those spikes. And when you see those spikes, you did something about it. During that spike, don't say, like Council
Property by
Reimer said,
property?
I'm shocked. I learned something. I didn't know. That's a surprise to me. Shouldn't be surprised, because we should get this on a yearly basis. Every council member on their desk should have what everybody pays in taxes,
illegal.
including myself, including the high rises, including the low rises, including the different categories, and we'd know where the problem is. And if you see a great spike in one of the categories, you do something about it. And that's simple as that. But you know what?
Can we hear from
A lot
staff?
more discussion on what I said.
I'm going to ask
It's
that.
not going to work.
I'm just going to ask staff to clarify that, because I don't think what Councillor Sikora is proposing is actually legal.
It worked.
Well, it may have,
Why wouldn't it work now?
you may have done. I don't think we can do it legally. But
Your Worship, we can't adjust individual taxes. The way we do the assessment is we average it out, and there are going to be some properties that have spikes, but Council does not have the ability to make any adjustments.
Oh, no.
One of the reasons that there are spikes, and it may be applicable in this case, is because in a relatively new building, they're not necessarily assigned the full value in the first year until the value is established by sales. So in 2012, there were sales information available to establish the values for this particular area of properties. Because it's a relatively new area. And that's what the value in 2012 was based on. So part of that increase quite likely was due to new information in terms of it just being completed for the first year. But we can't adjust individual tax bills. If an individual tax bill in a category goes up, there's nothing that we can do about that.
You know something, you're just not getting it. I'm not saying that individual taxes that you can adjust it. You're correct. But if there's a spike, like this family got, a spike, there's other spikes. There's many, many other spikes. You know, and if you see these kind of crazy spikes, the council member of the day can do something about it with those spikes. I'm not talking about individual piece of property, because if she got a 70% increase in taxes, I'm sure everybody around her got a 70% increase in taxes, and other people too. So, you know, I mean, we can go on
Your Worship,
all day.
but those are particular properties, and council doesn't have the ability to adjust the taxes for those individual properties. We can adjust them for the class as a whole. For every commercial property, council sets the tax rate, but we do not have the ability to adjust for a property or a group of properties individually.
And that's exactly what I said. You know, I mean, we keep on harping about the same thing. That's exactly what I said. But I also said that if there's a whole bunch in that category that have a problem, you adjust the mill rate. And this council can adjust the mill rate. We haven't done the mill rates since I got back on the council in 2005. Because you know why? When I went to Ottawa with some other mayors that were more interested in the golf course than doing the business of the city.
Lou.
Okay, Lou, unlike Councillor O'Neill, I can't golf. But thank you for the accusation.
I can help you with that.
I'm sure you, well, if you can help with my back, we're talking. Our challenge still is, though, that I gather that if in this category, in this class, we had a whole bunch that went up, or some that went up, and some that went up a whole bunch. And that meant that a whole bunch also went down, because the taxes for this class, the taxes we collected from this class went up by 2 3/4% in 2012. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So that meant that, and I've heard from some of the businesses, they aren't in front of us today concerned about the taxes because their taxes went down last year, and I regret that their taxes went down because your assessment went up so much.
It's also related to strata property. Commercial strata property and assessments are, and that's the argument with BC Assessment. There's 4 transactions that they based the assessment on. It doubled. In that package I gave you, it doubled. Yeah. And that was based on smaller square footages sold to business owners that own it and said, okay, I'm making a business decision here, I'm going to buy it. That's a non-arm's length transaction.
And it should have been
that
appealable,
will be brought up at BC Assessment through the appeal process. Had we known this last year in time, it would have been on the table then. So there is I think to Honourable Sikora's comments, yeah, you'll see spikes in different classifications, but particularly strata property, commercial strata properties, when they're small units, get hit harder because people pay more for smaller units, not unlike residential. Yep. So we know that, and we are going to be approaching BC Assessment on that basis.
Now we're heading in one particular point. Are we able to class commercial strata, small unit commercial strata, in a different class?
No, we are not.
I couldn't do that either. Okay. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I wasn't expecting us to spend quite this long. I'm not going to spend any time at all talking about how the system works or doesn't work. And it clearly, a good deal of the time, doesn't work. But we don't have a choice any more than you do with living with the system as we're presented with it. All of us on this council share your concerns about wide variations in levels of taxation on different properties and on the level of taxation on business. We're all concerned. We all want to do something. 8 of us don't see the solution as being quite as simple as Councillor Sikora does. It's much of it outside our hands, and we do everything that we can. The assessment base is a piece that we have no control over, and you clearly understand it, and you're dealing with it to the extent that you can. The rate differential, we certainly understand that as a significant issue. For 10 or 12 years, a number of years, Ms. McLeod can correct me if it's something like that, we've been working to improve the differential between our residential and our business rates. We've done that historically. We've done that for a long time. Tune in tonight, maybe we'll do it again. I can't say anything about that. And the last point I need to make, and the very last point in the document that you submitted when you said you'd like to come here, say, how do businesses require 4 times the services of residential? If anything, it's the opposite. You're right, residents need schools, hospitals, parks. Two of those things we don't provide, and businesses don't. But businesses need residents. They need residents for employees, and they need residents for customers. And everything that we do as a city supports that, as well as we provide a fair number of services that I think are essential to your business. Last point is, you said you're going viral, you're going everywhere you can. The Union of BC Municipalities just struck a committee to look into the very issues that you're talking about. It'll be doing its work over the next few months. It's chaired by Mayor Diane Watts from Surrey. If you check the UBCM website, I'm sure they'll be looking for public input, and I'm sure they'll get it whether they're looking for it or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, I'm glad Councillor Nicholson raised the question, the specifics here, because I was going to actually weigh in on that. There's been a couple of figures thrown out about the average commercial tax rate increase. Last year, I heard 2 3/4, and I heard 3. It was actually 2.56%, and the residential tax rate increase was 3.56%. We had approved overall an average of 3.16, and then we adopted the policy to have a 1% tax shift, a 1-point tax shift, and that led to 2.56 for commercial and 3.56 for residential. That was the 17th consecutive year that there's been a differential between the commercial tax rate and the residential rate, in which the commercial rate was lower than the residential rate. It was except for 1 year, it's an odd year of 2002, in all the other years, that last year's 1-point difference was the largest. So Council is very aware of this. We're doing what we can to shift the balance. It's a slow process. Other people have said that before. And as Councillor Nicholson said, I said, I'll echo him by saying, tune in tonight to find out what we're going to be doing for next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Others have said it. There are about 5 issues you've raised tonight, and I think one of them was the surprise, the fact that you had about 2 weeks, and that's outside of our control. That sounds like a landlord who's being completely unfair to his tenants. The other side of it was the amount of the increase, and that breaks down into 3 things. The assessment thing, which clearly this was about your assessment, of the increase of $10,000 increase or something like that. We're responsible, this local level of government covered about $280 of that, and the rest of the increase was essentially because of the assessment increase, and you should have been allowed to appeal that assessment. We want to find a solution, and I'll tell you, when you want to go viral, I urge you to include us, because I think our council wants to be there supporting you and trying to find ways to find solutions so that the tax rate itself ours are pretty darn low increases, and we're trying to make it a lower increase for businesses as part of that shift that's been mentioned. Ultimately, though, this is about repositioning the amount of taxes we collect from business, because I think it's unfair. I think we collect too much from business. We have historically. We have to get that in line. But this year we will collect we'll announce it tonight as to what it will be, but it will be somewhere less than 3%, I suspect, from businesses, an increase in the amount we collect from businesses as a whole, which means some will pay more than 3% and some will pay less than 3% increase. And I'm hopeful that you won't be among the ones that pay more. We certainly, Councillor Robinson wants to speak as well, but I want to thank you. My closing will be to thank you for coming in today.
Thank you, everyone.
No, Councillor Robinson.
I just have one quick question for you. Have you been in touch with the Tri-Cities Chamber of Commerce?
Yes.
And is their policy committee going to
Yes.
work with you? Great. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you, everyone.
Again, thank you. Ms. Clerk.
Item 2, report of General Manager, Parks, Recreation and Culture Services related to the Queenston Park design process. Staff recommendation is that the committee receive the report for information.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Asmus and Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I have a question about this. Is this work that we are going to be doing, or are there other people who can perhaps do a better and more efficient and quicker job thinking about developers?
Your Worship, this project is on the work plan for 2012. It will be done, managed by city staff, and engage a range of contractors working directly for the city.
And when can we expect it to be completed?
The project will be complete and open to the public by the end of 2013.
So about a year from now is when we can expect to see it completed. And will the Universal Accessibility Advisory Committee have a chance to take a look at it, to look at its universal design, making sure that everyone can equally participate in the park?
Your Worship, the Universal Accessibility Committee has expressed an interest in having input on park design projects, and so we intend to offer it for the work plan for 2013.
Right. Thank you.
Oh, I thought it was already on the work plan. Okay. Councillor Hodge.
I'm just curious. I understand at some point here, I guess in phase 2, the public is going to have a look at the park design and be consulted. Is that correct? And if so, when?
Your Worship, I would invite Waisu Louis, our park planner, to respond to that question.
Yes, actually, in phase 3, we plan to have an information session for the public to have a look and provide feedback.
And approximately when is that? Is it spring, I'm assuming?
We're hoping February 2013.
Okay. And my other question is, because of the popularity of the sport courts in Galloway and Millard Park, or Millard Orchard Park, I'm just curious. I see there's a possibility for one, but that's not being included in the plans at this point for this park, for Queenston?
Yes, that's right. Currently, we are exploring options that will include that for future implementation. Because it is not an item that is covered under DCC funding, we will need to explore how that might be funded, but currently we do have it as a part of some of our options for future implementation.
So even if we can't do it now, the level spot or whatever, something would be left for it, so it could be done later. Obviously, the potentially go in and do it at the same time, and possibly when other groups or developers are in there with paving equipment would, I guess, be preferred. But I appreciate the cost challenges here.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I have two questions. One of them I told Ms. McKay I was going to ask, so I'll ask the second one first. At phase 3, well, we have 4 phases. We have this report to council today, right at the very beginning, and then the next time that we're back here is at final concept design. And I had hoped that there might be an opportunity for us to hear the results of the exposure of options to the public and the gathering of public information before we go right to final concept design. Is that feasible? Is that something that could happen, or are there good reasons why it wouldn't?
Our information session, we are hoping, will be reduced in that we will have some feedback, but we're not hoping that the concept will change radically. It is a small park. We are expecting some tweaks. We are hoping that the options that are presented to council at the time in March will substantially move forward.
Okay, you know, it's a matter of judgment by staff, I think, and if that's your judgment, that's fine. That's why we engage you and trust you and ask you to do the work. I would suggest to you, though, that there is, if that's the process, there's a greater level of risk of revision by council. And go forward on that basis, that would be great. My other question goes back to deliverables at this point, where in the little chart on page 5, we talk about opportunities and constraints. And I got to the last page of the report and saw that and thought, I don't remember seeing those, so I went back and looked. And if they're in there, I couldn't identify them. So do we know what they are? Are they part of the reports? I'm just couched in nice, soft language so that I couldn't pick them out. Thank you.
In phase 1, we go through a fairly detailed process of information gathering. And from the information that we've gathered, which includes site survey mapping, site reconnaissance, photo documentation, as well as studying aerial photographs and the survey information. And from that, we make a list of opportunities and constraints, which include, if we're looking at opportunities, existing access and crossings to the site, which there are 2 of at this current time. Park frontage access both occurs on Princeton as well as Queenston. We've got some significant mature trees that would be good candidates for retention. We've got some nice cleared areas that we can work with as a part of our design to reduce costs and also to take advantage of existing conditions. We have currently a 10-meter SPIA setback that's been identified, and that we looked upon as an opportunity to help with an enhancement of the channelized watercourse. We have identified some areas where there's nice views for sitting, opportunities for play, seating. Some of the challenges that we've identified through the first phase process would be the channelized watercourse, and that we have to fit that in within our design. The elevation changes to provide some challenges in terms of accessible circulation throughout the site, as well as citing elements such as sports courts, because they do take up a large footprint, as well as opening sight lines throughout the site. Edge treatments along existing private and fence lines, shady spots, the removal of dangerous trees, and the house itself, at the removal of the house. So some of those are some of the challenges that we face when we're initiating the design.
Okay, and so in effect, I've read, when I read deliverables, these are deliverables. There's steps in the process, steps in the project, in for the kinds of things that have been gathered at this point. Mm-hmm. But they're not the subject of the report. The report is, here's where we are at this stage, and not the level of detail that I was perhaps looking for when I look back. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
I appreciate Councillor Nicholson's queries, because it sort of raised for me the question about community input. And I didn't pick it up the first time I read through the report. So if I'm understanding this correctly, there really isn't an opportunity for public input. You mentioned a survey, so I don't know whose survey that is. But really, public information sessions, just this is what we're going to be putting in your community, or in your neighborhood?
That's right.
So I have to say, philosophically, I do struggle with that. These are folks who live in the immediate area that I would think that if they all had really little children, they would want things that focus on their particular needs. If they all had teenage children, or if they were all seniors, that they would have particular needs or expectations. Even though I know things move and change and transition, But I think in terms of encouraging people to take ownership and responsibility for their outdoor spaces, I do think that fundamentally, at a philosophical level, they should be engaged earlier on, rather than, by the way, this is what we're going to be building for you, which is a bit too paternalistic for me. So.
And certainly staff share the values that you expressed, Councillor Robinson, with respect to the valued input from the community. This is a small neighborhood park, and the funding of this park is exclusively through the DCC program, which limits the range of elements that can be funded by the program. But certainly in Phase 3, the intent is to have meaningful consultation with the community in order to develop the options at that stage. That is the purpose of that, and while the language has been used as an information session, the idea is this is participatory, the community providing information around the elements that they would like to see in constructing the various options. So the intent is not to be a one-sided show and tell with staff saying here's what you're going to get. Clearly Phase 3 is involving the community in the development of the concept design, those options, and weighing those options to come up with a final concept to be presented to council.
So it's more than just tweaks. I mean, you know, so I'm picking up on just the description of what would happen. So to me, tweaks are, is it a blue bench or a yellow bench? Is the bench here or is it up here a little bit higher? It's not whether or not there is a bench. So I think it's important to, at least for me and for the community, to understand that they actually do have a real say. It's not just what color bench and do you want it over here on the right or over here on the left. So do we have assurance that there will be some real meaningful consultation about this is what we have money to do, and we want to hear from you around the kinds of things that you would like to see in this park, and then we can act on it.
Your Worship, Council can provide that assurance.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Motion is on the floor to receive.
And Councillor Reid has added herself.
Well, I hope I'm not jumping into a hornet's nest here, but from what I can, the only question I had is, I know that we have certain monies available to do certain things, but are we excluding, when we do public consultation, and I'll use Councillor Robinson's knowledge, we want a bench, if they said we want a bench, and we don't have money for a bench, are we not looking to approach some of the developers to buy a bench, and perhaps at an earlier time than they would have when the park was finished?
The process does provide for the community to give their input about what's important to them. We want to be very clear in the dialogue about what the funding envelope and the source of funding that is available, so that we don't unrealistically raise expectations in the community. Yeah. This is a basic neighborhood park funded by DCCs, but in the conversation we do want to be able to provide for future amenities should funding become available in the future, whether that's through a gift for the parks program or a grant program. We don't want to have to redesign a park every time we get a gift, for example. So engaging the community and using the expertise of our staff, this will create a park plan, but it will provide for potential future elements.
And we'll have identified those by that time, what elements we might want. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The motion is to receive. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 4 is Report of General Manager, Parks, Recreation and Culture Services related to the Canada Day event update. The staff recommendation is that the committee receive the report for information.
Receive.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Reamer. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. I have a quick question. And I'm trying to read between the lines, and I'm not sure if I'm doing it successfully. But are you planning for 2013 to do the map of the demographics of the attendees for Canada Day?
How do you turn it on?
And we have Jason Blood, who's the Acting Community Services Manager, here to answer questions. And while he's just murmuring to me, I can respond to that particular question. It was very popular to have that mapping exercise. We could do that again, or we could come up with another interactive, engaging activity for those that visit the civic tent.
Well, my suggestion is that if you wish to do other activities at the civic tent, or you're going to call it Coquitlam House, that perhaps the map could be done at the multicultural tent. That would be my suggestion, because I do think it's very valuable as an exercise, and people really relate to it. Thank you.
Well, it certainly went off well at the library opening when a similar structure was done. Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you. A good report, and looking forward to the event this year. Just coming under the Coquitlam House tent, the one thing I'd like you to work with is to bring in the Manager of Economic Development to set up within that. Since we're having all these people coming through, it's an opportunity to engage in economic development of the City of Coquitlam and reach out to those people that may be from Coquitlam or from the outside of Coquitlam. And if we're getting 60,000 people or plus, it's a good way to make sure people know about us on the economic side. Good point. Thank you.
Standing. Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I want to congratulate staff for another outstanding event, and that it's grown exponentially. Like, it's not like, it's not like it's years to sort of build. It just went from good to great very quickly, and I'm sure there were growing pains, but they were really hard to spot. So I just want to express great appreciation for that. And the part that caught my attention in the report was this idea, looking forward, of closing off the road. So, Mr. Suzak, are you paying attention? We think it's a good idea to close off the road because we're going to spill out over that site. And I think given that roads are an asset that all taxpayers pay for, we get to use them in whatever way we want, not just for cars, but for people. So I look forward to sort of expanding the site in that way and becoming more familiar with the roads in a more intimate way. So again, congratulations. I think staff did a fabulous job, and I look forward to next July's Canada Day. Thank you.
So Mr. Suzak has made note that one council member at least. Councillor Reid.
I just want to follow up on something that Councillor Reamer was chatting about, which was where you can pin a map. And when I lived down in the States at various festivals, they had "Where are you from?" Like, usually it was Canada. It went, and then there'd be a whole bunch in Toronto, and then Calgary, and then more in Vancouver, where people came from. But at the same time, you bought your pin for $1 or something, and the money went to some local food bank or a thrift store or some charity. But if you wanted to, you could also leave your name and your phone number down there, because you were probably a snowbird in there for a few months. So if somebody wanted to, they could go and look, all the folks from Surrey or from Vancouver or Coquitlam or whoever were there. And it was sort of a way of tying people together. So I was just thinking, in terms of all the multicultural folks that we have moving over here, there may be folks from some hometown in some country that we've never heard of that might show up at our festival and might meet a neighbor from many years ago. And I think that would be a really fun story to follow. So I'd like to explore if there's a way to do that. And it's totally voluntary, so we're not, poking into someone's privacy, but what a fun story that would be. We could get Councillor O'Neill to write it. Thank you.
There you go. Councillor O'Neill, do you
Beautiful segue. And speaking of fun stories, I just wanted to confirm that for the $500 level of participation in Canada Day, a prospective client here could set up a promotional booth, institute a product giveaway or sampling rights, get his or her or its logo on the website, and also logo in the thank you ad. And I'm asking this question on behalf of Mayor Stewart, who could probably take advantage of this and start his re-election campaign for just $500. So there we go.
What a fun story.
Can I confirm that? $500 is all it takes?
The problem is, Councillor,
I guess it is.
It would be us he'd be giving away.
Unfortunately, if we could move the festival ahead a couple of months, we'd have 2 ready-made candidates. Ms. McKay.
It's perhaps not a direct response to the question. I'm hoping it will satisfy the inquiry to say that we think that the $500 level and all the sponsorship levels represent excellent value to the businesses in Coquitlam in terms of the exposure that they can get from the 60,000 people that attend this event. I would agree that $500 is a heck of a good deal.
That's right. I wanted to get that on.
And that was the end of the speakers list until Councillor O'Neill opened his mouth, and then Councillor Asmussen jumped in, as did Councillor Sikora. So,
well, mine's not following the vein of Councillor O'Neill. No, not. But in the report, you're going to have the food services and an application, but I would encourage that to go out as early as possible, because it says, an application will be developed so we continue this, but it would be to get the broadest range. I think the earliest you can get that application out to the food service providers will get a broader range of applications and some interesting applications, I would think, also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. So, to the Parks Recreation, on these booths for $500, do you have some kind of guidelines who can come in, who can't? Do you have are you going to be policing it? So people with cigarettes and alcohol and things like that cannot advertise in there?
I'll turn that over to our expert, Linda Baker.
Ms. Baker.
The sponsorship program for the $500 level is we go after mostly local businesses that want to come on board and do tastes or things like that. We don't actively seek alcohol sponsors, except we do have one for the beer garden. And we only need one of those. But we do try to make sure that we're not, going after inappropriate businesses, because it is a family event.
How about the different things that come from other countries, the religion, things that maybe we may not be able to want to go there?
That is a difficult issue. We have not had that challenge. We've had one community group that was a church participate in Canada Day last year, and they provided an activity for the community, and we made it them assure us that it was not a time to be promoting your church. That's not what Canada Day is about. It's about celebrating Canada's birthday.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that particular one went well last year. There were no complaints or anything. Good. Thank you very much for raising that. Councillor Sikora, seeing none others. The motion is to receive, and I do want to mention right at the outset, before we vote on this, that I go on the basis of voice recognition, because I don't have eyes on both sides. So when a council member moves or seconds, I go on the basis of the voice as to who moved or seconded. So council members, please do not change your voice between elections. This whole deeper voice thing. This was moved by Councillor Reamer, I believe, and seconded by Councillor. The seconder didn't change. So the motion is to receive. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. No more voice changes.
Item 5 is report of General Manager, Engineering and Public Works related to possible modifications to on-street parking on Falcon Drive adjacent to Eagle Ridge Elementary School. And we have introductory comments from our General Manager of Engineering and Public Works and our Director of Public Works.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. These concerns came to us through the school and the PAC associated with the Eagle Ridge Elementary School on Falcon Drive. There are safety concerns, and you can see where staff's preferred solution is. Generally speaking, when it comes to traffic safety issues, we usually treat these as administrative matters and we simply carry out those improvements. However, in this case, there's a bit of a community impact, and we want to make sure that the community, through its council and committee, are informed of what our recommendation is. We do stand by the recommendation, the preferred course of action of eliminating parking on the west side of Falcon. It might impact some of those adjacent townhouses, if you will. However, on balance, we think that that is the appropriate course of action at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor O'Neill has it.
Yes, it might impact. I think it definitely will impact. And I know of the two options. The staff is recommending option 2, which is the more expensive option, and the option that would have the most negative impact on existing residents in the area. We talk a lot about parking around surrounding developments, new developments, and whether or not we're providing enough parking. Option 2 would see the removal of 15 on-street parking spaces. We can guess what the impact of that will be. I don't know how many of those spaces are used, but I drive the street now and again, and I seem to recall that there's usually some cars parked there. So I would try the lower impact thing first, where we say no stopping on school days, before going to the more harder hitting option of removing the parking spaces, changing the center line and all of that sort of stuff. I want to really exercise some caution in here. So, let's put in a system, and let's see if people abide by the system to begin with. If there's currently stopping allowed there and parking allowed, but people are jaywalking, okay, they know they shouldn't be jaywalking. Let's say no stopping, and that makes it pretty clear. They're not supposed to stop in these particular area. I don't know if it needs to be actually even as long as you're proposing as well, all the way up and around the hill. I would suggest a shorter length of a no stopping school days. Now, if we do adopt this, option 1, no stopping, the suggested time is 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. I don't think that makes sense, because the school is actually in session from 8:55 a.m. to 2:55 p.m. So I think more like 8:30, because 8 will be way too early, and actually it might force people to have to get up early and move their cars if they're parked there. And then I would suggest having that in effect until 3:30 p.m. I'm in favor of option 1, amended to 8:30 to 3:30, to take into account my concerns about the loss of parking and the actual operation hours for the school. And I'm told by somebody at the school that everybody starts at 8:55 and everybody gets out at 2:55. So I think that that should cover it, 8:30 to 3:30. There's not a staggered starting of different classes and things like that, so it's all comes in one fell swoop. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Asmussen.
Well, I won't take too much time. Councillor O'Neill has expressed it quite well. I'm going to support option 1. I think it's too much of an impact removing the 15 parking stalls on the townhouse complex there. We really haven't even communicated with them that there is the potential for a loss of 15 parking spaces, and I think we would get quite a email backlash in the future about not even giving some notification or communication for them to put their 2 cents in on this. And I've said this before about our townhouse developments that we're doing, that with the price of housing and townhousing today, it used to be a starter with younger kids and younger families. I'm going to see more people with older kids, more cars because of kids in townhouse development, so there's going to be a greater need for parking. So I just can't support. I think we need to start with option 1, manage that, work with the school board to manage their issues also. But I think it's too much of an extreme to take away 15 parking spaces on the road in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will add that I actually met with the PAC president. Mind you, we've been dealing with this school since I was DPAC president, and before, probably when Councillor Reamer was DPAC president as well. This is a blind corner, somewhat excessive speeds coming down there, and we saw dozens, and I met with staff as well, we saw dozens of people parking on that side of the street, parking illegally on that side of the street for that matter as well, or else even turning around in the townhouse development parking lot, and then jaywalking, or letting their kids out to jaywalk across the street. And this was dozens of people. These are grade 3s, grade 4s that are jaywalking across a blind corner when cars coming downhill on a wet street in the rain would just simply not be able to stop. I am actually reluctant to lose these parking spaces as well, but I think the risks of keeping the parking spaces are far outweighed by the risks associated with the I'd rather lose the parking spaces, quite frankly, than the alternative. And so I'm leaning heavily toward staff's recommendation, and I wonder if there's a way that we could go out to the townhouse development on a consultative basis and find out what the issue is with those spaces, because I've been by the townhouse development and seen those spaces full during rush hour, during the day, during the night, and I suspect that, in fact, I know that some of the spaces that are being taken up are actually people who work at the hospital and who are walking the block rather than paying the parking fee at the hospital. So I'm not certain entirely that these are actually people in the townhouse development. In fact, anecdotally, we hear from the school that they see people parking there and then walking, people in medical uniforms walking to the hospital. So I think we might be trying to save staff money at Eagle Ridge Hospital rather than actually supplying as much of the townhouse parking as we think we are. So I'd love to have that dialogue and find out if there's some other place that 15 people could park rather than putting these kids at risk. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. Well, I fully agree with doing some consultation with the townhouses. I don't want to support option 2 at this time. However, it probably is something that we might want to look at after we've explored option 1 and after we've done the consultation with the townhouses and after we actually find out who is parking in those spaces. Because if it is hospital employees, as an example, then that's a different story than if it's people who live in the townhouse complex. We're always trying to improve livability of our city, and so I say go with option 1, do some further consultation, and then bring this back again to us after that consultation has occurred, and we can look perhaps at option 2 at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I asked Mr. Suzak a couple of questions over the weekend. Before I get to them, I have to tell you, I brought it up on Google Earth, and Google Earth clearly shows 2 little kids walking across the street right beside the... Oh, you're kidding. So if you're driving via Google Earth, you're going to be careful because you know there's kids on the road. But if you're actually looking through the windscreen like most of us do... So the questions I asked Mr. Suzak to think about were whether we might simply put a crosswalk and whether we've consulted with the school district, because this is at least partially their problem. If we were prepared to put in a crosswalk and they were prepared to put in a crossing guard, we might solve all the problems without eliminating anything. If in fact the parking is supporting the employees of Eagle Ridge Hospital, I'm sure that our parking meters are a better deal than the ones at Eagle Ridge Hospital. We might think about that. I'm looking at it on Google Earth, and I have to wonder whether carving a little bit out of the school's property and widening Falcon, or bringing the entry to, they have a tiny little kiss and drop loop Starting it further down the hill would soften the problem on that side of Falcon. Maybe let us come to some more creative solutions that let the traffic keep flowing. And as an absolute last resort, and this was proposed by Joe Trazzolini at one point in a whole different thing, is cut Falcon off at the Port Moody border. Even though that's my favorite route for getting to my daughter's house in Port Moody.
I think he proposed cutting Guildford off.
Yes, I know. No, well, and this is a much smaller street. We're not nearly as aggressive as Mr. Trazzolini was when he was mayor of Port Moody. But I'd like to hear Bill talk about crosswalks and school board.
Mr. Suzak.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. My concern with a crosswalk would be, even if it is staffed by a school district crossing guard, is the fact that the city would be inviting crossing at that location at times where there isn't a crossing guard. And the geometry of this roadway and the specific conditions of this roadway would certainly, I think we'd be quite nervous about putting in a marked crosswalk in a case where the horizontal alignment has a bit of sightline challenges, and then there's also the hill factor and a bit of the speeding factor. So I can certainly take the idea to staff, and we can think about that, but that would be my first reaction. I'd be nervous about pursuing a crosswalk. The other issue about consulting more in depth with the school district certainly is something that we can do. We've simply had chats with the school principal and PAC people, and perhaps we should be discussing this a bit more with school district officials.
Perhaps not a permanent crosswalk, but then one of the challenges that I have, and I don't know whether it's because I've been around the city for a long time or because I'm getting older, is I drive past places, I have no idea what street I'm on. But there is a school site that I drive by fairly regularly, not on the main street, but on a fairly busy street. And I noticed that in the morning and in the afternoon, there's a guard, and there are traffic cones. And the guard, looks to me, perhaps doesn't enforce, but attracts far better behavior from the parent drivers than you would get if there weren't somebody there. So I don't see a crosswalk, but I do see kids crossing the street safely to get to the parent on the other side. And I see all the parents driving a little more slowly and a little more carefully. And that perhaps is a solution that was entirely found by the school board, not with our participation at all. Maybe if they'd asked, we would have said, no, you can't do that on our street. I don't know. So I think there's lots of room to look for other solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, just looking at the photo that you've provided here, and it looks like there's 5 cars parked there right now. I'm assuming they're parked because they're right up against the curb. I agree with the other councillor who said. I think we start with phase 1 first, and I agree. The 8:30 to 3:30 makes more sense. I drove by there last night just to have a look. I was on my way home last night at 10 o'clock, and I went by, and there were 4 cars parked there, and they were staggered throughout this area. So I think if they were from the hospital, and I don't doubt there's probably during the day, visitors and staff parking up in there, but they were staggered right through. I would think if they were just for the hospital, they'd be parked right down as close to Guildford as they could. So clearly there were, in my view, 4 residents who were parking there overnight. When I drove by, it was quite a mix. There were some areas there where there was no stopping. Some said no parking. Part of it said no parking December 1st to February 15th or something. So there's quite a mix in there right now. But clearly, without any consultation with the owners in that neighborhood, I'd be reluctant to move to a straight out no parking right now. I do appreciate the creativity and the approach, and I do recognize the fact that we don't want to have kids crossing the road. It is a dangerous crossing there, and we see the picture that's up on the screen right now where people are just coming across there. So, and it is a challenging going through there. So I would think that putting up the no stopping would be the first step and see if we get compliance. And I appreciate the fact that that might involve a bit of enforcement, but I think that's part of the education process.
Thank you. Yeah, the photos that are up now are obviously taken on a sunny day. I've been there on a miserable day, and the photos don't turn out as good as this. Councillor Reid.
Well, I think some of these little kids should look...
Councillor Reid's microphone, please.
Some of these little kids should look at their parents and say, do you love me? Because it doesn't matter whatever we do in this city, parents could give a hoot and hell less what happens to their kids. It's however I can drop them off, open the doors, and let them go. Now, I'm sure that's not all parents, but we've sure got our share. Let's talk about Walton. All the things we did at Walton School. And I know Bill's department was up there. We narrowed streets. We did this. We cut off corners. We've got parking restrictions in. And I used to walk the dogs there every day. And you'd go up there and you'd watch, and they come riding up, stop, push the little kids out of the car. They'd run across the street. I can't tell you how many little kids narrowly escape getting hit. Falcon is really awful because it curves. It's close to my house, so I use it all the time. It's a terrible street. It's even blind going into the top townhouse. The top townhouse, they all have double parking carports. And when visitors come, they usually sort of squeeze in at the back behind the two cars. And they don't have a lot of visitor parking, which, of course, goes to parking. Gee, not that I should be bringing up our parking. This is just the very beginning of what we're setting ourselves up to as we densify. I think we need a lot of consultation on this, but I think the school board needs to have a talk to themselves and figure out where they can put safe drop-ins and drop-offs in all the schools. It doesn't take much. Porter School. Porter's flat ground. You must go by there, Your Worship, a lot. When I lived up there, you'd go by and they have crossing guards out because the parents do the same thing. They pull up on the other side of the street, open the door, and out you go, kids. I mean, what we need here is parental education, you know? So at what time did we stop with responsibility? We're supposed to be teaching our kids what's right and wrong. This just doesn't work for me. I have real difficulty with this. So before we do anything, I think we need to have a big consultation, and if necessary, we need to get our RCMP to sit out every single school 1 day a week and throw out the tickets. And maybe when it hits them in the pocketbook, they'll actually realize that maybe this is important enough for me to look at, and maybe our kids really matter. So I don't know where you want to go with this, but I think there's a lot of people out there who need to be taken to task and perhaps really think before you drop your kid off in what's almost dark now at 3 or 3:30 on a wintry day on a sloping hill that could be icy, and a driver doesn't have a hope in heck of stopping if he had to. Maybe there needs to be some real adult conversation. Thank you.
Well, I won't disagree at all. One of the reasons I would support option 2, one of the largest reasons I would support option 2 is because it would make it safer to drop off kids on the other side of the street, on the school side of the street, by moving the yellow line over. You've essentially, right now, there is no room. If that van, for example, it's dropping off from a daycare, if that van is parked dropping off children, the cars can't get by, so they end up crossing the yellow line and the oncoming car anyway. That's why the yellow delineators went up. But by allowing another meter on the uphill side of the street for parents to properly drop their children off, I think we'd be in an infinitely better position. This school does have a drop-off loop that was closed. It's closed because their traffic consultant, and I agree with it, said this is incredibly dangerous because of the way in which parents drive. One of the results of a DPAC survey of traffic safety around schools, it found the question was posed, do you think too many parents drive their kids to school? And the answer actually wasn't that too many parents drive their kids to school, it's that too many other parents drive their kids to school. And that doesn't leave me any room to do it. We have, our society drives our kids to school more now. We need to find the right place for them to drop off their kids. I don't think on this particular site, I agree though that on some sites the school board ought to be looking at drop-off. I don't know on this site that the school board could. There is no place to drop off kids on the school property. We've actually worked with the PAC 3 years ago on the parking lot for Coquitlam Crunch as being the back door to this school. The parking lot to Coquitlam Crunch has room, and there are actually quite a few parents that drop off their kids at that parking lot, and maybe there's some improvements that we could do there. But ultimately, I don't want to be able to point fingers at who was to blame for a child being hit here. I think we need to take the action necessary to eliminate the risk as much as possible by getting parents to drop off on the right side of the street and not take up that space on the wrong side of the street and then do what these people are doing. Councillor Rasmussen.
Yes, well, I'm going to move option 1 as the option that...
I'll second.
And I think at the present time that's the best way to go, and I think the consultation is needed with... Yeah. 8:30 to 3:30. And with the amendment of 8:30 to 3:30 in option 1.
I agree.
And I also don't... Even moving... I was going to say, moving the center line over... I live by an elementary school, and it's narrow. People still will stop on the road to drop their kids off just because it's only one lane. They're going to stop. They don't care if they're inconveniencing anybody, and those kids will still run across. I don't see it as being the long-term solution. So I think right now, option 1, do those, work with the school board, the school district, and consult with the townhouse people. Thank you.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I support it. I think this is an intractable problem. I don't know that we have the solution, but I'm thinking a little bit ahead to Burke Mountain, and we are building some more communities on our mountainside. And can we make sure that we have some lessons learned about what not to do in terms of access to schools on curved roads, poor sight lines? No turnarounds, blah, blah, blah. Because even though we are building a supposedly walkable community, I think we need to be realistic that those folks are going to drive their kids to school, just like they do in every other community. And I want to make sure that as we move forward with Burke Mountain and we look at our school sites, that we're making sure that we are not going to have these kinds of problems. Because I don't know how to fix these. I'm not convinced that options 1 and 2 will actually, that either of them will take care of it. I'm not sure that we know how to fix it. But I want to make sure that we don't do this again. Thanks.
Councillor Reid.
I was in no way saying that there shouldn't be school drop-offs. And at that particular school, they happen to have a little house, I don't know what it's made out of. I don't really know if it was 2 portables together or what, right on the corner, which, God help us, is for little tiny tots that could obviously also get dropped off on the other side of the street and just would stop to look at a helicopter if it were going on. I mean, it's just, I go by there all the time, and it just boggles my mind that parents would do that to little kids. It just is unbelievable. So as far as I'm concerned, yes, there should be drop-offs, but somebody's got to start taking responsibility. And just because something isn't working, I mean, we as the city can do so much, but unless parents start taking responsibility and the school board starts taking responsibility, and if we have to start fining the parents, then let's do that. But we've got to do something, but it's going to take all of us. You can't put enough rules in place, Your Worship. You can't have enough barriers up, and you can't have enough no stopping signs. If parents who are driving, if the drivers of the car are not going to care enough for their passengers that they drop them off anywhere. And no matter what you go on this, there just has to be a really big discussion with everybody on this. So I'm done.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a procedural question. I'm not sure whether the motion to receive the report had been moved.
It had not.
There was no motion on the floor yet. There was a staff presentation first.
And I don't know whether Councillor Asmunsen's motion was seconded, which was to approve option 1. You did? Okay. Well, I'm going to suggest that
That's what it was.
we don't, at least in my experience, we don't usually make decisions in council and committee. We receive reports and have discussions and provide feedback to staff. And Lord knows there's been lots of that on this item. Sitting here and selecting option 1, I think there are lots of other options to explore. We don't know what the school board might be persuaded to do in terms of coming to the party, helping to solve the problem. I have no question. Option 1 of what we have in front of us is the preferable choice. And I think staff's heard that. And they weren't asking us to tell them what to do. They were telling us what they saw as the choices and wanted to hear what we thought. So they've heard what we thought, and they're going to go away, and I think I heard them say they were going to talk to the school board. They're going to do some other considerations, all based on what they've heard around the table. And then they're going to do what they're supposed to do, which is make the best decision that staff can make. It really, typically, I don't think is a council decision. But, so on that basis, I guess that's everything I had to say. I'm uncomfortable with the motion that's on the floor.
One clarification on something that was just said by Councillor Reid. The Councillor Nicholson mentioned the Google Earth. Google Earth is a couple of years out of date. There's since been one of the modular buildings that were meant for school all-day kindergarten has been built on the parking lot immediately south of it. So the Google Earth image is wrong. And that essentially means that the only spot that you could have had a drop-off, I think, off of Falcon has been taken up by the modular building now. And you're
But there's a big parking entrance there.
okay. And so, Bill, I think. Mr. Suzak.
Sure. Thanks, Your Worship. If committee's wish is to receive for information, we have a fairly, I think, clear work program. We need to talk to the school district. We need to find out what is the parking demand of the townhouse, and also who actually is using that parking. And there are means of confirming that. Once we've had some feedback from school district and further information on parking, we can come back with a firm recommendation directly to council.
That might be a better solution, because it seems to me 16, it's too late for that. We've got a motion on the floor, but hang on a second. There might be 16 flyers twice or 3 times, and we find out who actually belongs to the cars that are there or whatever. And Councillor Asman's got a motion on the floor, and I'm going to ask if there's any objection to withdrawing the motion.
I was just going to, we have one speaker left, and that's why I was waiting until...
I'm sorry, you're right. Councillor O'Neill. My apologies.
Yes, thank you. I started the conversation off by talking about option 1, and essentially what I was saying, if we have to choose one today, because it looked like they were seeking firm direction from us, that I would go with with option 1. Page 4 seems to indicate that, yeah, we were going to be making a decision here in committee. And I just wanted to ask another question of our General Manager, Engineering. There was a picture that we had that shows those center line delineators, those plastic pipes that stick up out of the road. Maybe we can look at those. Yeah. Now, I would imagine that one, I guess it's the nuclear option, would be to extend those all the way down the road, thereby prohibiting anybody who's going down the hill from turning left into the school, or anybody who's into the school turning left coming out of the school to going down the hill. That would essentially make all traffic to the school one way up the street, dropping people off in the school. And actually the drop-off point was one I used from time to time when my children went to the school. That was used quite effectively then. It was at the uppermost building. There's a little loop in there that you can drop off, then proceed back, continue going up the hill, or turning left if you wanted to as well. But I imagine one option would be to have those centerline delineators all the way down the hill, so that essentially it's made the only way you get to the school is going up the hill, and then continue going up the hill after you dropped your kids off or done your business at the school. Is that a viable thing to look at? I mean, it's the nuclear option, I think.
Well, I think you get more complaints from the townhouse that they can only approach it from
that's
above,
true.
So, Mr. Suzanne.
Well, Your Worship, we will put that into the mix of further staff work. The real issue, though, is whether or not those plastic delineators might prevent a child from actually crossing from west to east. They would presumably still be. Perhaps that's one of the options.
Well, you know, I guess if they're going to jaywalk through those, I imagine that even putting no stopping signs, narrowing the roadway to make it very clear that they can't stop there, they would probably stop anyway. So, you know, there's only so much we can do. Well, I guess the real nuclear option would be to build a 7-foot high wall down the middle of that road, such as they have on along Lougheed Highway at Shaughnessy there, prevent jaywalkers from happening. So I'm not suggesting that. That would be the true nuclear option. Anyway, so I'm quite happy to, since I originally spoke in favor of option 1, but now with a further explanation from the General Manager, I'm quite happy to wait till we hear back as well. So I'd support withdrawing. I would support the going ahead that way, just getting more information back from the General Manager. Thank you.
Okay, I've heard no objection to withdrawing. Councillor Asmussen.
Yeah, I'll withdraw, but the way the report was written was asking for direction on 2 options, and generally through committee, when there's option presented, we will recommend an option to council, and the way the report was written on, they were recommending one that we disagreed with, so that was the reason for the motion. But since they're going to take this back and come back with another report dealing with all the information raised, I'll withdraw the motion, and we'll receive the report.
Okay. The motion has been withdrawn as there's a motion to receive was made by Councillor Nicholson. Okay. Will you Councillor Asmussen to receive, Councillor Nicholson seconds, all in favor. Opposed, carried unanimously.
That concludes the items on the formal agenda.
Thank you very much. Motion to adjourn. O'Neill and Asmussen, all in favor. Opposed, carried unanimously.